the sad news is, and this all relates to it, right? The system is the air raid system. It's the same one that Kyler Murray used when he played in college at Oklahoma. And, of course, when he was coached at Oklahoma, he was coached by Lincoln Riley. And Lincoln Riley uses the air raid system, as does Cliff Kingsbury. And Cliff, of course, played for Mike Leach, who passed away sometime last night at the age of 61 years old. Now, you're going to hear, and we'll play for you, sound of Mike Leach. He was absolutely one of a kind. It kind of a dying breed. Sorry for the expression, but it's true. Like a dying breed of coaches who were kind of eclectic, immense, quirky personalities. That these guys now are much more robotic, much more like just wired differently than they were then. But the great one is this. This is my favorite thing to point out about Mike Leach is in 1998, Oklahoma was coached by John Blake. They were 101st out of 112 teams in scoring offense. They averaged 16.7 points a game. The next year, Bob Stoops was hired. Now, Bob Stoops changed their defense dramatically, and they became an outstanding defensive team. But remember, they were 100. What did I say? They were 108th? 108th? Mike Leach's only year at Oklahoma as their offensive coordinator, they were 6th in the entire college football in points per game. They went from 19 points a game to 35.8 points per game. Then he went to Texas Tech. And what you have to remember is he went into the old Big 8, Big 12, which was a Texas-based conference, and they might as well have been writing plays in hieroglyphics when he got there. Like they were caught in the, man, do we just line up and run option? Right, do we line up an option, or what do we do? Or do we run a pro-style offense? And the air raid system, which he started when he was at Kentucky in 98, Tim Couch was his quarterback, took to Oklahoma, took to Texas Tech. It changed college football forever. And then, he got to that Spurrier zone where he would just talk about whatever he wanted to talk about. I know people who worked for him. All of them liked him. And that's very rare. He definitely quirky, definitely old school in some of his thoughts and philosophies. Had obviously a lot of free time. There's a bunch of anyone who came into contact with him suddenly fell in love with following stories about pirates and Key West. Like Pat Knight's a friend of mine. It's Bob Knight's son. He has a pirate bar that I think he owns somewhere down on the western coast of Florida. But he fell in love with pirates during his time at Texas Tech, getting to know Mike Leach, and that kind of triggered his curiosity with it. But the rule was, and I don't know, Jay Stu, if you know this, the rule with Mike Leach was always tape a Mike Leach interview, don't do it live. Not because it wasn't good, but because he just rambled, and he went on and on and on. And so you hey, we can get Mike Leach. Great. Can we get him for do it an hour for the show? We'll probably tape, it'll end up going 25 minutes, half hour. Totally enjoyable, but it can be a long, winding journey to get to the enjoyable part. I remember he used to walk to work at Washington State, and he liked to do his interviews while walking to work. And he'd stop and get coffee. But then he would just get so lost in a conversation that you'd be, either doing an interview and he wouldn't be paying attention to people saying hi, or while doing the interview, you would hear all the interactions with everything else going on. Hold on a second. I'm going to go get my cup of coffee. Just give me a moment. And then I'm totally polite and then talking to everybody in it. And does he even know that we're still taping this interview? This is the best. But then talking about players' fat little girlfriends. Amazing. There's a lot of cuts that are out there. This is when he's at Washington State, and he started talking about all the Pac-12 mascot rankings.
Well, first of all, what kind of mythical powers does a Sun Devil have? We've got to consider that. I'm going to say the Wildcat's out. The Trojan, does he have a horse or is he on foot? Does he have a bow and arrow or just his sword? The Bruin, definitely formidable. Another bear up there at Cal. The tree, I imagine that tree's going to get chopped down. Unless we're going to go with a bird and somebody might get pecked or something. I don't know. And then the duck might lose interest and just fly away and get out of there, which may be good advice under the circumstances. The husky, no chance. The beaver, well, we'll see how long that beaver can hold his breath. The ute, again, we're back to, is he on horseback? Does he have a bow and arrow? Did he trade for a rifle? I mean, because if that ute's got a rifle, there's some definite problems. And then, you'd have to get one of those Harry Potter activists to read up on how you kill a sun devil, because there's a lot of outside stuff there. Just as far as a beast alone, a buffalo's going to be pretty hard to tangle with. I mean, a buffalo's utterly outstanding. Well, but Butch is going to have to be clear-minded and crafty. I mean, Butch will find a way. There's no question. The Cougar will find a way. Clear-minded and crafty, a combination of stay out of harm's way and attack when you get your chances or your openings.
I love. I love the. I love the thought on each of them, and then the true definition of the cougar. Crafty, got to stay out of harm's way. Every once in a while, get a sneak attack. And then are we talking the Trojan, or does he have a horse and a sword? Right, same thing with the ute. Just an enjoyable dude who obviously didn't take himself way too seriously, but was really, really curious. Curious people are my favorite kind of people. Just people that they don't take. And so it's like why don't you like Kyrie Irving with the flat earth thing? That's a whole exploration and curiosity. Like, yeah, I don't know if it's being curious when you're challenging what is scientific fact. Right? There's a way to be curious, and then there's a way to just kind of be confrontational and be a bit of an a-hole. And that's where others fall.
Do you think he was like that, Doug? Do you think that it
was an act?
He over time knew that it was kind of his shtick, so he would think about things to meander on about, or was that just him in his purest form?
I think it was unapologetically him. I think it was unapologetically him.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's just where his mind would go. And where other people have that inner monologue and they keep it in, like his was just, he would think out loud. And that's why, like if you listen to that cut, he starts with the Sun Devil, he circles back to the Sun Devil, because that's how your brain thinks, right? Is that sometimes you come back to different things when you're scattershot and you're all over the place. I truly believe that's, because I had a friend and she tweeted about it. Her name is Brittany Cranston. Brittany's an Oklahoma State alum. She worked for a bunch of different people. I think it was when she was working for Twitter. She was in Jerusalem, and she ran into Mike Leach, got to know Mike Leach, and they ended up going on the tour of the old city with Mike Leach, and friends ever since. And her thing was that's just who she, even in real life, that's who he was. Don't get me wrong, guys, when you get into your 50s and 60s, once you have a running kind of bit on a topic, you always fall back into the bit. But I don't think that makes it fake. I just think it makes it, hey, this is a topic I've already tackled in life, and here's my thoughts on it.
And if you think about it, just most head coaches, especially in football, they go out of their way to not be interesting first and foremost, and they're racing to the end of their answer. What's going to get me to the end of my answer the fastest so I can get back on the practice field, And Mike Leach was the opposite of that. Truly the opposite of that.
Yeah, he'll be missed, and then he did the road less traveled, and I think part of it was because of his quirkiness, and his style. It worked at those places. I don't think it would have worked. There was a long time when he was at Texas Tech, and he He was interviewed for the Tennessee job, but it was more he actually flew himself. You guys remember? He flew himself to Tennessee, flew himself to Washington to interview for these jobs. He ended up getting the Washington State job. But like the reason that he fell out of favor at Texas Tech was he wouldn't do the booster thing. He wouldn't do the, like, even those quirky conversations. Like, if he didn't like you or if he didn't respect you, want to be right, he just didn't do it. He cost himself a lot of games by not wanting to run the football. I remember I was at a Oklahoma State Texas Tech game when he had Michael Crabtree there, and they were either up a score or 2 scores. It was in Stillwater, and like literally their offensive possession was like 20 seconds. Where if they just ran the football, it would have been fine. And I think Brandon Pettigrew had a great catch and run for Oklahoma State, come back, score a touchdown, and Tech still had a chance to win the game. Crabtree dropped one in the end zone, but it was more like if you just would have run the football, the clock would have run, you would have won the game, and he cost himself a couple Big 12 titles that way. So anyway, that's a way of saying like he just was unapologetically him. And I think that's what people like most about him. People love authenticity. And fake authenticity sometimes is hard to tell, but it's like it's the same thing as like it's the opposite of Russell Wilson. Why do people dislike Russell Wilson? There's nothing wrong with any of the messages that he's spreading. It's that they think he's a phony. When people think you're a phony, you're kind of done. And I don't think anybody thought he was a phony, and I don't think he was. Do I think like that every answer was as thoughtful and meandering as? Probably not. But I do think that he was in this business long enough where had it been an act, it would have been exposed by now. Would have been exposed.